The night air was heavy with a drizzle that clung to everything, soaking the city in a film of quiet despair. The sidewalks glistened with reflected streetlights, and the traffic rolled past with that muffled hiss of wet tires on asphalt. Philadelphia felt tired, like a place that had stopped hoping anyone might do the right thing. And in that moment, Diego Rivera felt the same way. Diego was just 18, but already knew what it meant to carry suspicion on his shoulders. It came with the name, the brown skin, the accent he sometimes slipped into when he was tired. Since childhood, he had seen how eyes followed him in stores, how neighbors double-locked their doors if he and his friends rode their bikes down the block. He had learned to keep his head down, to walk carefully, to speak gently, as if the smallest mistake could confirm every stereotype laid on him. But tonight was different. Tonight, Diego had stayed late working at the garage, trying to save up for a used car so he could maybe start a delivery job. The rain had caught him halfway home, forcing him under a bus shelter with a flickering light. His hoodie was damp, and his sneakers squished when he shifted his weight. Every car that passed sprayed a little more water, like the city itself was determined to push him back. He was used to that, too. The feeling that no matter how hard he tried, someone would find a reason to push him back. A teacher side-eyeing him for speaking Spanish to a classmate. A customer at the shop refusing to believe he knew how to fix an engine. Even the security guard at school, who watched him closer than anyone else, as if Diego's very presence was a threat. That resentment had settled in Diego's heart a long time ago. It was not a loud resentment, not something that screamed. It was quiet, heavy, slow, the kind that built itself brick by brick until he had to swallow hard just to breathe past it. Sometimes he wondered what it would feel like to be free of it, to just exist without worrying that his skin, his name, his past, would define him before he even opened his mouth. He was thinking about that when the gunshots rang out. 3 pops, sharp and fast, like firecrackers but unmistakable. Diego ducked by instinct, pressing his back to the glass of the bus shelter, heart hammering. He peeked out, saw a man stagger from a corner bodega, then collapse on the pavement. At first, Diego's mind refused to process what he was seeing. Then the streetlight hit a glint of a badge on the man's chest, and Diego's breath caught. A police officer. The uniform was dark with spreading red, and the man was trying, failing, to press a hand to the wound on his side. His other hand fumbled for the radio clipped to his vest. Diego felt rooted to the spot. His first instinct was to run, just like he'd been taught. The rules were clear: if you were brown, if you were near a crime, you did not stick around. You did not help. Because helping could look exactly like guilt. But the officer's eyes locked on Diego, wide and desperate. In that instant, something cracked through Diego's fear. He couldn't just leave him. He thought of his uncle, who'd taught him first aid after a workshop at the community center. He knew how to stop bleeding. He could try. He ran. The rain felt harder as he crossed the street, pelting him in sheets. He skidded to a stop next to the officer, crouching low. The officer was pale, gasping, his eyes glassy with shock. "Hey, don't move," Diego said, voice shaking but steady enough. "I'm going to help you, okay?" The officer tried to speak, but only a thin wheeze came out. Diego scanned the wound. Low on the side, bleeding fast. He stripped off his own hoodie, bunching it tight, pressing it to the wound, applying as much pressure as he could. The officer groaned, flinching away, but Diego held firm. "I know it hurts, but you have to stay with me," Diego urged. "Stay with me, man." Somewhere in the distance, a siren started to wail, growing louder by the second. Backup was coming. Diego looked around, searching for any sign of the shooter, but saw no one. The street was eerily empty, as if the city had already turned its back on what was happening. He tried to keep pressure on the wound, counting the seconds between the officer's shallow breaths. He remembered what his uncle taught him: talk to the person, keep them awake, don't let them fade. "What's your name?" Diego asked. The officer blinked, struggling. Thomas, he rasped. Okay, Thomas, I'm Diego. You're going to be all right. Just look at me, okay? Look at me. The officer's eyes focused on Diego, and for a split second, there was something like gratitude there. Something human. Diego felt it catch in his chest. That moment, brief as it was, reminded him why he couldn't leave, even if the world said he should. The police cars screeched in moments later, blue and red lights splashing against the walls. Officers jumped out, guns drawn, shouting commands. Diego froze, hands still clamped on Thomas's wound, hoodie stained with blood. Drop it. Get away from him. Hands in the air. Diego tried to explain, words tumbling out. I'm helping him. He was shot, I'm trying to stop the bleeding. They advanced anyway, grabbing his arms, twisting them behind his back. The hoodie fell from his hands, dark with blood. The officer he tried to save reached out weakly, but the others didn't see it. Suspect in custody, one of them barked into a radio. Diego felt the cuffs bite his wrists, cold and hard. He tried to speak again, but they weren't listening. All he could see was Thomas, still on the ground, eyes wide and unblinking. A paramedic pushed past, taking over the pressure Diego had been applying, and for a moment, Diego felt a deep, crushing fear that all of this, every moment of courage, was about to be buried under suspicion once again. They shoved him toward the squad car, and the resentment in Diego's chest burned hot. Of course they thought he did it. Of course the brown kid crouched over a bleeding cop must be the shooter. It didn't matter that he had saved the man's life. His skin, his clothes, the neighborhood, those were the things they saw first, the things they would always see. He tried to breathe past the panic, past the ache of betrayal that the world had taught him to expect. They didn't even ask. They didn't look for a weapon. They didn't check the security cameras. They just saw him. And decided he was the danger. In the back of the squad car, Diego's heart pounded so hard it felt like it might crack his ribs. Rain streaked down the windows, blurring the flashing lights. He felt small, smaller than he'd ever felt before, and yet inside him something sparked, a tiny, angry ember refusing to die. He had done the right thing. He had. No one could take that away, no matter what they called him, no matter what they assumed. He closed his eyes, replaying the moment Thomas looked at him, that instant of gratitude, raw and real. Diego held on to that, clung to it, as the car pulled away into the rain-soaked night. It was all he had. Somewhere deep down, he made a silent promise to himself, no matter how many people chose to look away, no matter how many people chose to judge him first and listen later, he would never be that person. He would never walk away from someone who needed him, even if the world had never done the same for him. That promise settled inside him like a seed. Maybe, one day, it would grow into something stronger than resentment, something bigger than fear. But tonight, sitting cuffed and wet in the back of a police car, Diego couldn't help but wonder if anyone would ever see him for who he really was. That question burned through the darkness, following him like a shadow, as the squad car drove on. You won't believe how quickly they turned on him. That one moment, Diego was the hero, and the next, he was a suspect. The rain had barely dried from his hair when they dragged him into a police station that smelled like old coffee and bleach. They guided him to a bench with a shove, metal cuffs still biting his wrists. No one met his eyes. No one asked him why he helped. Their looks carried the same story: he was the problem, not the kid who saved a life. The officer at the desk barely glanced up as they booked Diego in. His voice was flat, dismissive, as he read Diego's name, the way teachers used to do on the first day of class, each syllable weighed with judgment. Even the fingerprint tech handled Diego like he was a threat, eyes darting away, flinching as if Diego might lunge. Every moment felt like another punch, like the world refusing to let him be anything but suspicious. Sitting in the holding cell, Diego's heart ached with a deep, steady hurt. He thought of every time in his life someone had acted like this, crossing the street when he walked by, watching him in stores, assuming he must be stealing, assuming he must be trouble. It was the same story playing over and over. Even after risking everything to save someone, they treated him like a criminal. And that hurt burned. It made him wonder if they'd ever see him for what he was, or if he was doomed to carry their suspicion forever. The detectives came in after a while, their shoes squeaking on the tile. They looked him up and down like he was a broken machine. One sighed. Another wrote something on a clipboard without even asking his name. Diego swallowed hard, feeling his mouth go dry. All they saw was a brown boy in the wrong place. "So, you shot the officer?" one asked. No emotion. Just routine. Diego felt heat rush through his chest. "No. I helped him. He was bleeding, I tried to stop it. I didn't shoot anyone." The detective just made a note. That's what they all say. That phrase hurt worse than anything. They all say. Like Diego was a type, a label, a statistic, not a person. Like there could be no other explanation. He tried to steady his voice, but it trembled. "You have to believe me. I didn't do anything but help." One of them raised an eyebrow. "So why were you there?" Diego wanted to scream. Why was he there? Because he refused to look away while someone died. Because he couldn't stand to let a man bleed on the sidewalk. But he knew they didn't want that answer. They didn't want to hear he had a heart. They wanted him to fit their idea of what a young Latino was supposed to be: dangerous, violent, worthless. Diego looked down at the floor, trying to fight back tears. His chest felt like it was caving in. He remembered being followed in a shop when he was 14, the clerk watching him with cold suspicion. He remembered being pushed by a security guard at school because he was laughing too loud with his friends. He remembered the counselor who once told him to think small, because kids like him didn't get scholarships. All those moments piled up now, crushing him. The detectives left him alone for a while. Diego could hear their voices outside, muffled but certain. Words like flight risk and gang connections filtered through the glass. None of it was true, but it felt like poison in his veins. They were building a story around him, one that erased what he'd done. One that made him a villain. He tried to breathe through the fear, reminding himself of the officer's eyes, that moment when Thomas had looked at him with gratitude, when Diego knew he had done the right thing. He held on to that, because everything else was falling apart. Hours passed. The fluorescent lights buzzed above him, washing the color out of the world. Every minute was a new slice of pain. Officers passing by pointed at him, whispering, some shaking their heads like they'd already decided. Diego felt small, worthless, and so tired. He wondered if there was any way to break free from what they saw, from what society had told them to see. When the cell door finally opened, Diego looked up, expecting another insult, another accusation. Instead, it was a younger officer, eyes kind, voice low. "Hey," he said gently, "I heard what happened. I think you did something brave." Diego almost didn't know how to react. That one kind word cracked him open. His eyes watered, shoulders sagged. "I didn't hurt him. I swear." "I believe you," the officer said. "I'm going to talk to the detectives, okay? Just hang on." For the first time since he stepped in that building, Diego felt like someone might see him for who he really was. It wasn't enough to erase all the hurt, but it gave him a thread of hope. Maybe the truth still had a chance. "You think you know how this ends, but it's about to break your heart." Diego had barely slept through the endless night at the station, his mind replaying every word, every cold glance. Even the kindness of that one officer felt distant now, like a candle in a storm. At sunrise, they moved him to a cramped interview room with peeling paint and a table bolted to the floor. No one told him if the officer he helped was alive. No one told him anything. His resentment kept rising, like waves that wouldn't quit. The way they called him, "kid," with that cold edge, the way they let the cuffs dig into his skin, the way one guard patted him down twice, rough, as if trying to find something dangerous that wasn't there. Each tiny humiliation left a scar. Diego sat with his fists tight on the table, trying to swallow the pain. He had helped, but the system only saw him as a suspect. Then the public defender arrived, rushed and distracted. She barely looked up from her papers. She mispronounced his name, then asked if he was legal. That word cut straight through him, stirring up all the fear and shame his family had lived with since he was a child. He tried to explain, but she was already moving on, speaking in a voice too loud, describing him like he was a case number, not a person. Diego could see how broken the system was. How it moved people through, never stopping to see them, never caring what was real. That hurt him more than any slap or insult. He felt like the walls were closing in, crushing him. Wasn't he the one who had saved a man's life? The emotional twist came hours later. The detective slammed the door open, tossing a file on the table. "Turns out the bullet pulled from the officer doesn't match the gun we found by you," he growled. "You're free to go." Relief should have hit Diego like sunshine, but instead he felt nothing but numb. They had let him sit there, broken, for nearly a day, knowing they had no proof. And no one apologized. No one thanked him. They just unshackled him like he was nothing more than a mistake to be cleared from the books. As Diego stepped out into the morning air, he took a deep breath that felt like glass in his chest. The news crews had gathered, snapping pictures, asking questions he couldn't answer. A few voices shouted hateful things. Why was he near the cop? What was he doing on that block? Why did he look so angry? Diego felt their words stab at him. They had made up their minds, no matter what. He tried to walk away, but a reporter shoved a microphone in his face. "Did you really help save the officer?" she asked, as if she couldn't believe it. Diego nodded, forcing words past the stone in his throat. "I tried to save him. I couldn't just leave him." But the cameras didn't want to see him as a hero. They wanted a villain or a victim. And Diego felt resentment all over again, growing in his ribs, cutting deep. Even when you do good, he thought, people will twist your story. He kept walking until the station was far behind him, head down, shoulders tight. A city bus rumbled past, splashing dirty water on his shoes, but he barely noticed. He was thinking about every crack in this country's promise, how people like him were pushed aside, how the system threw them away, how even the small chance to do good turned into a nightmare. At home, his mother hugged him so tight he couldn't breathe. Her tears soaked his shoulder. But even as he clung to her, Diego felt changed, like he'd left something of himself in that cold cell. He realized he had to do more than survive. He had to find a way to change the story, because no one else would. Every story has a breaking point, this was his. Diego could feel it deep in his bones as he woke up the next morning, the world outside still gray and wet. The neighborhood felt colder than usual. On the sidewalk, people looked at him differently. Some nodded with pity, some with suspicion, and some didn't look at him at all. He'd been marked. In their minds, he was that boy from the news, the boy who might have shot a cop, the boy who didn't belong. As he walked to the small store to buy milk for his mother, he heard a group of kids whispering. They weren't strangers, he had gone to school with them. But now their eyes held a new distance. A girl he once helped with math turned away. Diego felt it, like a slap. Society never let you start fresh. It held you by your mistakes, real or not, and wouldn't let go. He tried to focus on the simple tasks of the day, but even paying for groceries was heavy. The cashier avoided his eyes, gave him change with fingers that barely touched his. Diego wanted to shout, to tell her he wasn't a criminal, but the words stayed buried. What was the use? They had decided who he was. That night, he sat in his room and replayed every look, every whispered insult, every sideways glance. The resentment bubbled up until it felt like it might choke him. It reminded him of all the times the system failed people like him, how kids in his school lost scholarships because no one guided them, how families couldn't get the help they needed, how someone was always ready to blame them instead of help them. That weight settled on Diego's shoulders like stone. Then, in the middle of the night, the phone rang. His heart jumped. His mother answered, listened, then called for him, her voice shaking. "It's the hospital," she said, handing him the phone. Diego felt his pulse hammer. The officer. He was asking for him. "Diego?" the voice rasped. It was Thomas, weak but alive. "I wanted to say, you saved me." Diego's breath caught. That one sentence broke something inside him, and at the same time healed a part of him. Finally, someone saw what he had done. Someone knew he wasn't the villain they tried to paint him as. Tears burned in his eyes. "I'm glad you're okay," he whispered. Thomas was silent a moment. Then, "I'm telling them you saved me. You need to know that." Diego closed his eyes. Relief, pain, pride, all of it swirled through him. Maybe, just maybe, this could change things. But he also knew how long stories could follow someone, and he was afraid. Would society really believe Thomas? Would they let go of their fear long enough to see Diego's truth? Before the call ended, Thomas added, "You should come see me. Let's talk. I owe you." Diego wasn't sure if he was ready for that. But the fact that Thomas wanted to see him gave him something powerful, hope. He sat awake long after, staring at the dark ceiling, wondering if this was the start of healing or just another test. And just when he thought it was over, the phone rang again. A reporter. They wanted him on live television to tell his side. Diego hesitated. What if they twisted his words? What if they made him the villain again? But then he thought of Thomas, of the moment he decided to act instead of running away. That moment was still his. He couldn't let them steal it. He would speak. Even if his voice shook, he would tell the truth. Hook transitioned before ending, but what Diego didn't know was that one powerful secret was about to change everything, a secret Thomas had been holding back, a secret that could turn Diego's whole world upside down. You won't want to miss what happens next. Sometimes the truth changes everything, and sometimes it just shows you who you already are. The day Diego walked into Thomas's hospital room, he felt the eyes of every nurse, every visitor, following him. Some recognized him from the news. Some whispered. That familiar sting settled in his chest, a reminder that no matter what he did, the world might never fully believe him. Thomas, lying in the bed, looked fragile but grateful. The moment Diego stepped in, Thomas raised a hand. "I'm glad you came," he said, voice steadier than Diego expected. "There's something you need to know." Diego braced himself. Thomas went on, telling him that his body camera had recorded the moment Diego saved him. He said the video showed Diego running toward him, applying first aid, not holding a weapon. Thomas promised to release the footage, to tell everyone exactly what had happened. Diego could barely breathe. For a moment, the weight of days spent under suspicion seemed to lift. But then he felt another pang of resentment. Why did it take a camera to prove his heart? Why wasn't his word enough? Why did he have to be filmed to be believed? He nodded slowly, gratitude and pain mixing together. "Thank you," Diego whispered. Thomas looked at him, honest and steady. "I failed you," he admitted. "We all did." Those words dug deep. Diego had always known the system was unfair, but hearing it from a police officer made the wound sting fresh. He wanted to believe things could change, but part of him felt that change would come too slow for people like him. The next day, Thomas's statement went public, and the footage spread. News anchors called Diego a hero. People who had doubted him reached out with apologies, with messages of support. But Diego felt those messages like paper, too thin to cover the scars. He was grateful, yes, but he also couldn't forget the hours in the cell, the way strangers had looked at him, the way even his old friends turned away. He spoke on live television, voice trembling but strong. I helped because it was right. I didn't do it for headlines. I didn't do it for forgiveness. I did it because that's what a human should do. Some people clapped, some cried. But Diego saw the shadows in the corners, the doubters, the ones who would never see him as more than a story to consume. That resentment stayed with him, a reminder of how far society still had to go. As the days passed, Diego began working with Thomas on community talks, sharing their story with schools and local groups. Each time he stood in front of a new crowd, the memories of those harsh hours in the cell came flooding back. They made him shake. They made him wonder if the world really wanted to change, or if it just wanted to feel better for a moment. Still, Diego kept showing up. Every time a kid listened, every time a teacher nodded, he felt a spark of hope. He refused to let what happened define him as only pain. He wanted it to matter. One evening, after a long meeting, Thomas turned to him and said, "You know, you're changing hearts." Diego smiled, though it was a tired smile. "One at a time," he said. "But I'm still afraid." Thomas nodded. "Me too." That honesty between them, the fact they could admit fear, was a beginning. Diego carried that with him, even on nights when the doubts came back. As he lay in bed one night, thinking of everything he had lost and everything he had gained, he knew there was no going back. The world had shown him its cracks, and he had stepped through them, refusing to break. That gave him strength. And maybe that's the message we all need, that no matter how many cracks appear in the world, people like Diego refuse to fall through them. They stand up. If that inspired you, don't forget to subscribe and share so more voices like Diego's can be heard.